Hey guys, how's it going? So, I've been wanting to make this video for quite a while now. We currently have the World Cup going on, and I've been casting, but I can't quite explain everything in the play-by-play and why players are making certain decisions, why they're picking certain ways, etc. While the games are going, there's multiple of us, and there's too much happening too fast. So, I wanted to go through a few matches here and talk about why these players are making these decisions, and why the draft is the way that it is. I think a lot of people seem to misunderstand a lot of factors to drafting and why people play the way that they do. And so I think this is the perfect opportunity with the World Cup going. You see a bunch of amazing professional matches, and I picked out some matches that I thought the draft made a lot of sense. It was easy to follow. There wasn't crazy just RNG with the match. And something you also have to keep in mind is sometimes you will draft a team that makes so much sense. It feels perfect. But then a player maybe has a unit built in a weird way that you don't expect. Or maybe you just get unlucky and it's RNG. This is Epic 7 after all. We all have to be ready for that, right? But if we exclude those factors and we just talk about why you should make some of these decisions in the draft, I think that it could possibly help a lot of people. And so before you even get into the drafting phase, obviously building certain units is very important. I recently made a video talking about a tier list, essentially, of what units I would recommend people build if they're a newer player, so you can check that out as well if you have any questions about some of these units or what units I think that people should have. I mean, some of them are free, such as, like, let's say Spectre Tenebria, or Arrowwell's a 3-star you get to specially change, or Aiden. Those are just a few examples of characters that I would expect most players to have. But even if you don't have all the characters here, what's important is understanding why the players pick the way they do and what these decisions are. So let's just start right here. This is the very beginning. So both players have already banned their characters, and he has first pick. You usually want to ban stuff that you just don't want to deal with. Or maybe you have a certain type of team comp you want to pick. Or maybe you just don't own certain units, so some people will ban characters that they don't own that are really strong. But something important is when you're first pick, usually you can leave more units up, because you know, you get the first pick, so you can take these powerful units away. So notice, Hoopus tier banned Lua, while Apocalypse banned Zio, and both of them banned Emerald Landy because they just don't want to deal with the character. Very frustrating, very RNG. But what's important to note is that because Poopus' second pick, he banned Lua. Lua is an incredibly powerful character that everyone fears. So he banned this character because he doesn't want Apocalypse getting that in the first pick because it's so strong. And Apocalypse didn't really feel like banning it because he just kind of says to himself, well, if he doesn't ban it, then I just get to pick it, and so he has to essentially waste this ban by getting rid of this unit. While Apocalypse is a little more lenient, and he can get rid of something that he just doesn't really want to fight, something that could be a little annoying for him, because maybe he wants to first pick something like Lilius, and then the Zio could possibly be used to deal with it, so he just doesn't really want to fight that. But that's something important between first pick and second pick and the ban phase. Now, let's get into the actual draft. Enough of the preamble, right? So, we see Apocalypse picks Emolius, so he is dictating the speed of the match. He's picking a very fast unit instantly, and so now Poopus has to respond. He can't just pick whatever he wants. He needs to pick characters that are actively able to deal with this, because Apocalypse not only has first turn advantage, he is a fast character, but also Emolius is very flexible and can be used in lots of teams. He could slow his team down and bulk up a bunch and use Emolius to support them, or he could go full aggro or even cleave out of this character, a very safe unit. So Poopus has to draft in a way where he's also flexible and able to fight against multiple types of teams. So if we skip ahead here, we see that Poopus responds with Emo Koeric and Summer Lilica. And the reason for that is, oh, let me go back right there. Well, we see the spoiler of the next pick, but ignore that. The reason he picks like this is because Emolius has a lot of debuffs, a lot of control, very frustrating, so he wants to make sure that he, no matter what, will be able to cleanse the debuffs from this unit. So the Emo Koeric is a very safe, strong pick, and Summer Lilica is generally considered a counter pick to the Emolius. So he's drafting very defensive and slower characters. He's not trying to contest the speed or anything like that. He just wants to pick in a way where he's making sure that no debuffs are going to harm him. And obviously he doesn't want to show his DPS either, because then they could get easily countered, unless they're an insanely powerful character like Emerald Landy, for instance. So he's just playing it safe, doesn't want to show all of the cards in his hand, and just picking 2 characters to deal with this. But notice that's the power of first pick. He had to pick 2 units just to fight this first one, but then also just support the rest of his team. So Apocalypse responds with Angel of Light and Last Rider Crow. Now, as you can see right here, no DPS units are picked on either side. But because Poopist has to pick these two characters right here, at least one of them has to be a DPS, because you have to pick minimum 2 DPS every match, because otherwise your opponent will just ban it, and then you just instantly lose because you have no damage on your team. So that's another big thing about first pick versus second pick, is that you have to show your hand just much more before your opponent. Now, Apocalypse has this wait-and-see approach. He has 2 more characters. He has to pick 2 DPS here, but he can pick 2 hyper carries that are supported by his team. Now, what's also important, Angel of Light is very annoying into Emil Quirk. They sort of counter each other because he's the ultimate cleanser that can cleanse basically anything. It doesn't matter if he gets debuffed. Well, she's an amazing debuffer that is able to strip all of his buffs. So it comes down to like a Mexican standoff where he cleanses everything, she strips everything. Very annoying for both of them. But also, she is able to help protect against this unit because her skill 2 will do an AoE and her S2 will be able to cleanse that partially. And also she can then skill 3 to remove the debuffs. Just a very annoying unit, and also Angel of Light blocks off a lot of characters from working, characters that can't deal with getting their skills removed or getting silenced constantly. So she's a very frustrating character. As you can see, Apocalypse has tons of debuffs, while Poopist has tons of cleanse at the moment. And then he picks Last Rider Crow, just a very secure tank to have mitigation with Aureus for the team, while also putting a lot of pressure and doing extra damage that can help support your 2 DPS at the very end, and also giving immunity to the team, which can help protect you against some of the debuffs that might also come out of Poopist's next picks. So just overall a very safe and secure team. Now, we see Poopist picks 2 characters. So, he picks Apocalypse Ravi, and he picks Yolha. The reasoning for this is, well, he has to pick at least 1 DPS. Apocalypse Ravi generally seen as a very safe and secure character. She is very bulky, she has lots of survivability just built in, and she's also pretty good against those units because Last Rider Crow doesn't really do much damage to her. She heals it back so easily, and she does injury damage to deal, you know, he will do less damage on his next skill 3s, etc., because he's constantly losing his max health from her. She doesn't care that much about getting silenced from Angel of Light, and she's not very that scared of something like Emil Lilius either because she's so bulky that the aggression's not as dangerous for her. And then he picks the Yolha here because she is a character that is not only able to revenge kill somebody, so essentially when she gets low on health, she's able to immediately kill somebody with her skill 3, but she works great into a character like Last Rider Crow because he does so much damage in AoE that she takes a crazy amount of damage just from his skill 3 because she has Aureus and takes some of the damage from the rest of the team, so she's almost immediately able to skill 3, finish something off, especially with the help of Apocalypse Ravi. That's what Poopist is going for. Now, notice what Apocalypse is going for next, though, because Poopist's team, while he has been thinking about this correctly and how to approach fighting these, he's leaving a hole in his team at the same time. And so, what we see next is Apocalypse decides to pick their 2 supposed hyper carries into Poopist's team. And now we're at a point where Apocalypse should be happy with how his team is, and he's probably going to ban whatever's last because it's probably a unit that counters his entire team. Now, if Poopist doesn't pick something strong enough, something that's not a good enough counter to his team, he could actually opt for banning something else, but most of the time you'll ban the final unit. Now, here's where a problem arises though. Are these really the 2 most powerful picks that Apocalypse could have gone for? You see, you have to think about what could go wrong here. And so, Poopist, looking at your team, is probably going to ban one of these 2 DPS, and then it's Apocalypse Ravi versus the other. And these units both do injury damage, which can make Apocalypse Ravi useless, but Apocalypse Ravi also does injury damage, which can make them useless, so it's a bit of an awkward scenario. Now, these aren't really considered hyper carries. Hyper carries are usually characters such as Green Landy or Emo Landy, for instance, a character that can solo the entire team as long as you protect them. Spectre Tenebria is another possible character. Even characters like Remnant Violet that with proper support and protection, they're able to take out the whole opponent's team by themselves and they're very hard to deal with. Now, these characters don't exactly fall under that. And so, we see Poopist's final pick is Lionheart Sirmia. And guess what? Lionheart Sirmia gets banned and Alencia gets banned, and it becomes Apocalypse Ravi versus Ilyanov. Now, Ilyanov is relatively safe against a character like Yolha, which is good, but Ilyanov herself is a fairly fragile and weak character, and if you look at the support on Apocalypse's side, it doesn't really aptly support her. They don't have much shields or damage reduction, the silence doesn't really do anything against her, the vigor is nice, but her dual attacks with her is also not very useful. So a little bit of a spoiler for what happens in the match, but essentially Pupus just runs over Apocalypse and just completely slaughters his Ilyanov way too quickly for him to be able to take her out. He has shields which protect against the injury and damage reduction. She's able to also give defense buff, which protects you even more. And even she has a chance to possibly provoke when the immunity wears off from Last Roar Crowd. So essentially what I'm saying is that Pupus drafted a little sketchy, but it paid off because Apocalypse didn't really pick the correct hyper carries at the end. And the reason I'm saying this is, let me show you what happened next game. Does this draft look a little bit familiar? Well, Apocalypse was first pick, and they kind of just traded the same characters back and forth. Until the very end, Apocalypse decided to pick Roy Mustang and Spectre Tenebria, while Pupus picked Karina. And so, you want to know what happened in this match? It's the exact opposite. Apocalypse's team completely rolled over Pupus, and the reason being is that Pupus' team is very vulnerable to something like Spectre Tenebria. He has no reach to be able to kill her, and they can get constant dual attacks, and the vigor is very strong, and she's safe from Yolha as well. And while Roy Mustang, very, very safe character into something like Apocalypse Ravi as well, and you see 2 green units, so they were most likely going to be missing all of their attacks and also doing less damage against him. He's very safe, he gets immunity for free, he gets free dual attacks and vigor just for more damage. So essentially these are 2 much more strong hyper carries into a team that Pupus has. And so what's really important to note here is understanding what your actual hyper carries are and how their team could counter what you have. Because in the first game, they picked units that could theoretically beat them, but they're not as secure, they're not as safe. Something like Yolha can put pressure on them and possibly deal with them or provoke them. While something like Apocalypse Ravi is just doing so much damage and it becomes a race against time. Well, if you pick much safer hyper carries like in this match, and you really think it through what you want to go for, it becomes a lot more secure. So Pupus just responds to the same stuff, but this time Apocalypse goes, oh, you know what? I think I have a better option for hyper carries than what I went for before. Now, this is the next match that I want to go over. So I hope that first one made some sense on why the players are picking the way they are and what's important. Now in this match, I might want to go a little more in depth of the power of speed in these picks as well. So, first pick by Uigang is Angel of Light. And keep in mind, there are 3 bans on each side because that's how this game mode works. So some things will be a little bit different than how a normal RTA match is. But what's important is understanding why they're picking in the ways that they are and what's strong. So if you look at the bans, there's still cleansers up and some stuff like that, and there's still a lot of DPS up, but Spectre Tenebria and Aiden are gone, and they're very powerful characters. Now people often ban Aiden if they want to do lots of AoE or tons of aggression. Spectre Tenebria is a big hyper carry and used in a lot of drafts, so he didn't want to deal with that either. Makes the game a little more honest, where characters are actually able to attack each other. And he picks Angel of Light as their first pick, which immediately puts the pressure on the opponent where they have to start getting cleanses. They need to start picking characters that don't really care about getting their buffs removed or don't really care about their skills being silenced, which is really important. And 2 characters that are usually very good against Angel of Light, Aiden and Spectre Tenebria, are both banned. So, we see Pupus pick Emo Landy and Emo Kawerik. So, Emo Landy, an insanely powerful character, doesn't really care too much about the debuffs that much. She's overall very safe against them and secure, just a very strong bruiser. And Emo Kawerik, a staple character at being able to cleanse. As I said before, like these characters both sort of counter each other in a way, but I would say that Emo Kawerik sort of supports the team more, while Angel of Light is trying to pressure the opponent's team rather than supporting her own. Now, neither player is picking fast either. Both players have kind of shown that they're ready to play a slower match, more tank down. You don't have Emo Lilius in the equation, you don't have Lua in the equation, 2 of the most popular ones. You do still have units like Zio and Peyra pickable as well though. So you have to keep these things in mind, because the opponent could ramp up the aggression by picking these fast characters. And when an opponent has fast characters in their team, you immediately have to play differently. because you can't just pick characters like Zahak or Last Piece Karin to counter something like if they have an evasion unit, because they're always going to have that character that outspeeds that. You're always living under pressure when they have a fast character. So when the opponent picks something like Emo Lilius, you have to respect it. Or if you don't want to respect it, you pick something faster. But if you don't have the confidence to pick something faster, you don't have a Peyra that's decently geared, or a Ran, or you don't have Zio or something, then you have to play in a little bit of a different way. You have to respect the opponent's pick. You have to realize that because they have that character, you can't just pick whatever you want. You have to pick a lot safer, and you also have to respect what characters could combo with that. Now that they guarantee to the first turn, they could pick characters that aren't crazy fast, but are always going to be faster than your slower units, because they can protect them with their fast unit to disable your units. So that's just something very important to note in this match, and just all matches in general, really. Now, Uigang decides that they don't really want to go fast, probably because of something like the Emo Landy, or he would rather go for a slower, bulkier match. If you go fast, then she's a great character into aggression, so she usually slows the match down immediately. So we see Uigang go for Lionheart Sirmia and Last Rider Crow. Now these two units together can do so much damage, very, very powerful, just full damage aggro into the opponent's team. She constantly counterattacks, so she's a great pick, and he's just a useful big damage dealer, gives immunity, and when you have both of their skills coming out at once, it can sometimes just nuke an entire team. So he's just going for a very safe team, and he has a DPS picked, and one of the reasons is they're very highly contested against a character like Emo Landy. Also, when people are going Emo Landy, Emo Quirk like this, they're usually not going to be too aggressive. They're not going to be picking all the fast stuff all the time, so you feel a little safer picking a DPS that might not be the strongest versus aggression, but is very strong versus the DPS. Sorry, I burped right there. So, next, we see Poopist wants to go for something very safe. We've seen this before. He goes for the Apocalypse Ravi, and he goes for the Yolha. The reason being that Yolha is able to easily take out a DPS like this after his skill 3 or her skill 3 or together. Very strong character into those, and she self-cleanses, so she's even decent versus Angel of Light. The Apocalypse Ravi, we said before, is already safe against Angel of Light and Emo Crow, but also relatively safe against her, usually doesn't die, can actually take her out relatively easily by herself. So he overall just has a very slow, bulky, and very safe team. He's got 4 characters that are actually very strong to Uigang's team. So what Uigang has to do next is either pick 2 DPS that are able to completely crush his team, or pick another DPS and a really strong support that are able to crush the team. Now, you have to think, what are characters that are actually safe into these units that don't just immediately die? Because there's characters like Remnant Violet that may be strong into Emo Landy and Apocalypse Ravi, but then they're not very good into Yolha, so you really have to consider what units are getting blocked off, what doesn't feel that safe. You want a character that ideally, like we saw before with the Spectre Tenebria Roy, are safe against all of their units and very protected. But if Poopist has drafted well enough here, which I believe he has, you can't as easily exploit that type of draft, and you have to pick things that aren't just guaranteed answers, because if you're able to pick 2 characters that hard counter his team, well, you've basically essentially instantly won the match. So, what do we see Uigang go for? So they go for the Briar Witch Asaria, which is a really, really good character into this team overall. It makes it so Apocalypse Ravi can't revive. It completely strips all of his buffs off, so it makes his skill 3 really weak, and also defense breaks their whole team. It makes it so that Emo Landy, even with her anti-crit, if she's defense broken, she takes so much damage. It also makes it so that Yolha would be able to get instantly one-shot by something like Lionheart Sirmia if she's defense broken. Very powerful unit, and there's also not a lot of reach on Poopist's team to deal with it, so that's a very strong pick. Now the next pick he goes for isn't quite as strong, and they go for Roy Mustang. The reason being is that he's going for a character that's a hyper carry that can carry his entire team with damage and is also relatively safe. You see something like Spectre Tenebria ban, maybe he wouldn't have wanted to pick it anyways because it's not always the best into a character like Emo Landy. But he wanted to pick something safe and strong. I feel as though Roy may have not been the exact best possible choice. He maybe could have gone for something else, but there's not many characters that are that safe into Poopist's team. If you pick stuff like Landy, for instance, or Remnant Violet, they could get knocked out of stealth by her, or she could skill 3 and instantly kill the Remnant Violet, so it's very scary. Now, what I will say though is Roy is a bit precarious because you have a character like Landy that can use her S1 into salvo, which can really burn him down easily. Essentially what I'm saying, you don't have to know all the specifics, but what I'm saying is that Roy is not that safe of a pick, and he needed to pick something that was a lot more secure into this team. Now, Landy is really hard to fight though, keep in mind. So now Poopist, probably feeling decent about his team, decides to pick a character that he thinks is a force ban for Oigang, because Hera completely shreds Roy, completely shreds Briar, which is Saria. Even Angel of Light, it's pretty annoying to fight. So he picks this character thinking like, Oigang is definitely going to ban it, and I'm going to take out the Briar, which is Saria, because I'm not as scared as Roy. Now, this match has a little bit more RNG involved than the previous one, but the victor ends up being Poopist, because the Roy Mustang is just not really able to handle the Landy. He doesn't have guaranteed hits against her and doesn't ignore the anti-crit or anything like that. So he can be taken out, especially with just being able to attack down him with someone like Quirk and strip the shield and just so much aggression from their team. He's not able to survive it. And something like the Lionheart just immediately gets taken out by the Yolha as soon as she's taken enough damage. Now, you could say it maybe is a gear gap, or maybe there's a small amount of RNG that could have gone different, that could have gone either way. So those are things to keep in mind. But that's essentially the gist of how this draft went and why the players were going in the way that they did. Now, the next match here is also a Poopist versus Oigang match. And you'll notice that there are more characters banned, but that's besides the point. So, we see Oigang with the first pick, and he picks a character like Landy, very strong character, I think we all agree. Now, Poopist picks a character like Angel of Light. So Angel of Light, very frustrating to fight. You still have something like Quirk up, but she can cause some of the AoEs to backfire by her giving skill in all the team, really useful. Just really frustrating character to fight overall, especially when you don't have cleanses, and forces you to have to draft in certain ways. Then he goes for Last Rider Crow. It's a very safe wait-and-see approach. He wants to take this character away from his opponent, but he knows full well that Oigang can still pick something like maybe Yolha possibly to revenge kill something like this, or revenge kill one of their units. And also someone like Quirk is up. Now Oigang goes for Quirk, not very surprising, the best cleanser in the game, especially against someone like Angel of Light. And his next pick is Yolha. I actually, even though I pre-looked at these things, I actually totally forgot how some of them drafted, so that was kind of just a guess that he was going to pick those, actually. But it makes total sense because they're safe characters into Poopist draft. They're able to deal with the Angel of Light, able to deal with the ML Crow. Now, next, we see Poopist go for the Lionheart Sirmia, as we've seen people do before. Lionheart Sirmia and Remnant Violet. The reason for these is Lionheart Sirmia very good into Landy, she's constantly activating it, which punishes their team, and Remnant Violet is a very strong character into ML Landy. So he is usually able to 1v1 her pretty easily, but he is kind of weak to Yolha, but also she's pretty weak into Yolha. Yolha actually has picked the litter right here, where she's going to be taking a lot of damage from Last Rider Crow or Lionheart Sirmia or both, but she's pretty much able to immediately kill one of these two characters in response, which is very dangerous for someone like Poopist. And you also have to keep in mind, Oigang has two more characters that he can take as well. And you've picked a character like Remnant Violet. Now keep in mind, Remnant Violet is usually only picked at the very end, or with a character that's very fast, such as Emo Lilius. And what happens here is, well, Oigang says, okay, I have Yolha, who can kill one of your units. I have Landy that you have to basically put all of your damage into to possibly take out. And I have two more characters I can pick. So what he does is he picks Zahak and Leica. And Poopist right here, I'm going to be real, the moment I see this draft, it's over. It's immediately over. Oigang's team completely crushes Poopist. I'm not sure how it would be possible for Poopist to really be able to come back from this one. The draft is just kind of over at this point, really. You see someone like Zahak is able to immediately take him out at the very beginning of the match, and Leica is also able to immediately take him out at the beginning of the match, or able to take her out at the beginning of the match. Actually, she can really take anyone out at the very start of the match. Yolha is able to guaranteed kill the other one, basically, unless something crazy happens or he misplays. And then Landy's waiting in the wings, just ramping up, so you essentially have too many threats for you to possibly deal with a 2 DPS team here. And Oigang just completely rolls over Poopist. In fact, I'm pretty sure this match ends in about one turn. maybe 2 turns overall, just immediately crushes him. Now, this is what's so important about drafting characters that are flexible and safe. Pupus doesn't have anything fast, and since he has no speed units whatsoever in his team, no contesting at all, Uigang can just pick 2 characters that are not the fastest units ever, but are going to go first and just counter his team. Now, if Pupus had something such as a, let's say, Peyra, or Zio, or Emo Lilius, just as random examples, they would be able to control these units so easily that Uigang wouldn't have been able to be so bold as to pick characters that don't always guarantee take the first turn like that. So Pupus just gets completely crushed in this match. It doesn't even matter what he last picks, and it doesn't even matter what he bans. He picks Apocalypse Ravi, Uigang's going to ban whatever he picks there, and then he's just going to completely roll over his team. So it was just instantly over there from the outset. Now, in the final match that I wanted to go over here is Marguerite versus LV. Now, if you look at these bans, we see a little more variety. Obviously, Emil Landy is still up, which is pretty important, but there's no Angel of Light. So Emil Quirk isn't as important for everyone. There's no Lua, as per usual. No Aiden, no Zio. So, LV is ready to pick something such as Emo Lilius. She's just open. Emo Lilius and Emo Landy are open, 2 of the most pinnacle, best units in the game, picked all the time. So, LV, he was cycling through the Emo Landy, but decides to opt for the Emo Lilius, actually, instead. Now they have first turn pressure, which is very, very powerful. It's possible Marguerite could contest that, though. So, what happens is Marguerite goes for Emo Landy and Emo Kawerik, just very safe, strong characters, wants to make sure they have a cleanse, one of the best carries in the game. They don't really want to fight against it, but also it can be risky to pick sometimes too, because the opponent can draft in certain ways to counter it. But if you're looking at LV's team here, if I were him, I would probably pick something such as, you could go for something like a Yolha Lionheart, possibly. It's relatively safe overall, and they're 2 characters that are pretty strong into Emo Landy, and since you have the first turn advantage, you don't really have to be as scared of them possibly cleaving you or doing too much aggression for the Lionheart to survive. So they go for Lionheart and Arrowell instead. Arrowell just gives a lot of safety to the team, and they do have the Lionheart as well. Now, if you're on Marguerite's side, you actually could go for someone like Yolha to revenge kill a unit like this. And your other character, you could go for someone, let's say, Ravi maybe is relatively safe into these units so far. Something along those lines. So they opt for the Yolha, which I would say is not all that surprising. There's not too many tanks people want to pick, and they actually go for Box Ravi. Look, I pre-watched this, but this is more just off the cuff. Like, I actually forget how most of the players draft in these matches. It just makes complete sense to me that you would approach the draft in this way, because it's overall a relatively safe way to look at the match. So now we see them pick both of those units. And so LV has 2 characters they can pick here. If you look at Marguerite's side, they don't have any fast characters whatsoever, and you have Emilius, so you can go really aggressive. You can go full aggro on them, but you need characters that are able to deal with Emo Landy and a Ravi, which could be a little bit difficult to do. There is a unit such as Spectre Tenebrae available, but she's usually pretty good against it, even though she's not very good against it. So let's see what LV actually decides to go for. They go for the Emo Laika, and they go for the Briar Witch's Saria. Now, the Briar Witch's Saria we've gone over before is very strong into a team like this. He's not able to cleanse it because he'll always go before her unless you build in a specific way. She'll defense break, which will normally proc a counterattack, and then she gets to clean up the entire team against a defense broken whole team. So she's a very powerful character, and they picked the Emo Laika into this team because she's basically able to instantly take a unit out. Now, Apocalypse Ravi is generally considered to be really good into her because she can often survive the skill 3 if she's tanky enough, especially with someone like Arrowell, let's say. But she's also pretty good into it because even if Laika kills someone, she will then be able to skill 3 the Laika and immediately take them out, which revives that character that they just removed, and then you have an advantage. But something that's also important to note about Emo Laika is even though she takes one of their units out, she normally then gets taken out right after. So it's a 1-for-1, but it's about taking out a really core unit out of your opponent's team so that they can't really respond to you. So what we see LV go for here as a final character is Summer Luluka, which is strong into Emo Lilius. able to respond to her and cleanse, and it's also good into her because when she uses her skill 2, she will push up and be able to silence her, and can even silence the Briar Witch's area, so it puts them into a difficult scenario. So we then see the bans go like this. They ban out the final 2, but you see, here's what's important, and I won't show the entire match, but I'll essentially tell you what happens and why it makes sense. The Emolika does a ton of damage and is actually able to immediately one-shot the Apocalypse Robbie. So you might say, okay, well, this is looking bad for Marguerite. How is he supposed to win at that point? Well, the Emolika, as I said before, doesn't really do anything after. So it becomes Lionheart Surmia versus Yolha and Emolandy. And so the loss condition for LV is Emolandy getting her skill 3, which you're essentially on a timer, but then they have to push the damage onto this Yolha. So instead, what LV should have done is they should have picked Yolha in this position because they find that they're not able to actually fight against it here because the Yolha is able to revenge kill this at any time. The moment that Lionheart uses her skill 3, she'll probably be low enough to be able to then skill 3 and instantly take her out. Even though Landy is pretty bad into Lionheart and constantly just giving her juice to spam her skill 3, by having a tank like this take her out, it essentially makes it so LV has no chance because they have no other pressure that they can really put on. A lot of people pick something like Last Rider Crow plus Lionheart Surmia together, because after you use Last Rider Crow's skill 3, she will have taken a ton of damage, and then they'll proc a counterattack, and she'll be able to then mop up the entire team, usually one-shotting the Yolha after. But LV in this situation doesn't have any of that. They have no pressure. They're full defensive, but you don't want to play defensive against a character such as Emolandy. So LV ends up getting completely crushed, even though they pick such a powerful unit and they have the first turn advantage. Problem is, they needed another unit like Briar Witch's area that completely tears apart Marguerite's team. But even though she's able to kill her, she immediately gets taken out, and then you could say it's a 1v1 of Emolandy versus Lionheart, but it's actually a 2v1 because Yolha's also going to take her out, so LV just at such a disadvantage and gets completely crushed. Anyways, I just thought that this could be helpful to some people, taking a more deep dive on why the players are picking some of these characters, why the matches played out the way they did, and these are matches that are a little less RNG than some of the previous ones. There were a lot of matches where both players picked decent drafts, but then maybe the player that even picked the superior draft got crushed due to either speed RNG or 15% or a whole number of things. And that's something you have to live with in Epic 7 because it happens all the damn time, right? But even other than that, it's just really important to understand why people are picking in the way they do, and why you can't just pick whatever you want. Why you can't just pick a Remnant Violet here, as we saw how it got completely destroyed. Why you can't just pick Zahhak into an opponent that has something like Aiden when they have a fast unit like Emolilius. You can't just expect to ban any of the early units. You have to assume that all of their early units are going to stay and that you cannot ban them. You have to pick a team that is able to beat their whole beginning of their team, because you're going to have to ban something at the end. And you have to pick in a way where you're not too vulnerable that they just pick 2 characters that instantly take you out, like that match where Hoopus had to fight the Zahhak and the Emolika just got completely crushed because his team just wasn't really that coherent and had way too many weaknesses. Anyways, I just thought I'd make this video because I thought it was a lot to talk about, and it's kind of interesting, and maybe it helps you understand a little bit of the meta, but even past the meta, I hope that it makes you understand a little bit of the power of first pick, a little bit of the power of the first turn speed on your team, how you can put pressure on your opponent, and how you're supposed to approach drafting into some of these characters. So anyways, I hope that helped. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like or subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment below if you have any questions or want to talk about anything, really. I'll try to answer what I can, and I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll hope to see you next time.